All right, I'm going to give it away to Janine, who's the Executive Director of Leader in Energy. It's been a great partner with us, and I'm really excited about this next panel, so I'm going to stop talking now.
Thank you, Charles, for that introduction. We're excited about the panel, too. And just a quick shout-out for Jason Latour and his team, Genevieve Sack, and everyone who helped us here at the Canadian Embassy. So just love the venue, and just thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay, so wow, you got my slide up already. Wow, fantastic. The topic of our panel is, can commercial kitchens achieve zero food waste? So we're going to be focusing on food. And I don't know if you guys have noticed or not, but it just seems like food waste has become a really hot button topic. You know, you can't even use a plastic straw anymore and all this kind of stuff. So it's really kind of exciting how it's almost gone viral in terms of food waste. And even, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of glad, the Trump administration, they're rocking and rolling on food waste. They may not be doing much on other events, but other kinds of things, but they're doing a lot. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So just wrap your head around this for a little bit, because I played around with some statistics last night. So USDA says that Americans waste 150,000 tons of food waste a day. Kind of hard to wrap your head around 150,000 tons of food waste. So I thought, let's look at the internet and see what they can help me figure out here. So it turns out the space shuttle, one space shuttle is 75 tons. So that's about 2,000 space shuttle equivalents of food waste every day generated in the United States. And then I was thinking, you know, we've got 400 standard metropolitan areas here, you know, Greater Washington, D.C. and others. So that equates to about 5 space shuttles a day on a national mall of food that is wasted. So I'm walking here today on the way to the Canadian Embassy, and we see a couple people on the bench. We've got about 50 million food insecure people. There's got to be a better way to do it. So hopefully we can talk about better ways to do things. So, and when the better ways to do things, the EPA, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this or not, but it's kind of a cool upside-down pyramid on kind of 6 ways to go about trying to get some better success in terms of reducing food waste. And one, and we'll talk about this with Brian and others, how do we reduce this to begin with? I know, look, I'm guilty. I throw out some food too. I'm really trying to get better at it. And if we do throw out food, restaurants and that sort of thing, can we first feed hungry people? I know there used to be laws against doing that, but hopefully that's changing too. Okay. So, and then feed animals, industrial uses, composting, and landfills. So I just wanted to kick off that discussion. So I am absolutely delighted to have our distinguished panelists here today from all kinds of industry. We've got Katrin O'Brien from Hilton. We've got Alain Facteau from Solucycle, which is a neat company that I had heard about when Charles visited our working group, how you are doing the industrial uses in terms of, food waste into energy and fertilizer. And then we have Annika Landrino doing great things, an architectural firm, and opened up a whole new perspective for me that I hadn't really been familiar with. And then Brian Stickle, who is a former executive chef of all these cool places that I really like to go, except I haven't been to all of them. 1789, Hamilton, Old Ebbitt Grill, Clyde, so just fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of chunk this in key discussion areas and then save your questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. So let's get started with a quick introduction, and we'll start with you, Katrin.
Absolutely. Thanks, Janine, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Katrin O'Brien. I'm the Senior Manager of Corporate Sustainability at Hilton. So in my role, I oversee our global environmental sustainability strategy and our efforts to reduce energy, water, and waste across our 5,500 managed and franchised properties around the world. So we operate in 106 countries. Our corporate responsibility program is called Travel with Purpose, and this past May, we released our new corporate responsibility goals to cut our environmental impact in half and double our social impact by 2030. We're really excited about these ambitious new goals, and amongst those goals, we've set 23 sub-targets in the various areas in which we operate, so looking across our value chain, in our communities, in our operations, and our supply chain, we've set goals both on the environmental and the social side. We've set science-based targets, so we're actually the first hospitality chain to set science-based targets to reduce our carbon emissions in line with the decarbonization pathway set in the Paris Agreement. So we're really proud of that accomplishment. We've also set the goal to send zero soap to landfill by 2030 to make sure that we're recycling all of the soap bars being used in our hotels. But what we're here to talk about today are our food waste goals. So we've set the goal to reduce our food waste by 50% by 2030 in our managed portfolio. We've also set the goal for all of our managed hotels to have food donation programs in place. And we've been doing a lot of really exciting work in this space. So looking forward to sharing more with all of you.
Ella?
Well, I'm going to show you a little video that will explain what SodaCycle is doing. This is a Sheraton Congress Center, which has two robots, one in the lavatory where they wash the dishes, and one in the kitchen. So after the banquet, they empty the plates in that kind of trash can. And then they empty the trash can into the robot. It's throw and forget, because you don't manipulate the food waste anymore. No water, and it doesn't go to the sewage. So this is the kitchen robot. Different residue or waste. It's a kitchen equipment, therefore it has to be cleaned every day. And the robot door can be removed and put in the dishwashing machine. The robots are connected to through a 4-inch pipe to a tank. And in that case, the tank is beneath the loading dock of the Congress Center. We always know the level of residue in the tank, so therefore we managed to call the hauler, which is a local partner. They add scent so that there is no odors around the collection of the residue. This is the local biogas plant that is owned by the city. And the gas is used to heat up the Congress Center. And about 1 million BTUs are sold to Laval University as a green gas instead of blue gas.
Very good. Thank you so much. Annika?
I'm the Sustainable Design Director globally for HOK. We're an international design firm, so we do architecture, but also engineering, urban design and planning, interiors, consulting, lighting design, a broad range of different services. We're in 25 cities, including 3 in Canada. So I put a little Canadian flag there, Ottawa, Toronto, and Calgary. And we work on a broad range of project types, different markets, in particular to food services that could be hospitality, corporate campuses, airports, sport venues and convention centers, hospitals, universities. So a lot of project types where there would be a large volume of food and food potential waste coming through. And we work on projects, and particularly I work on projects that could be anywhere from a few thousand square feet to planning for cities or regions that could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of people. And so in particular, where I'm looking at it is in the context of when you're planning for 100,000 people or even 1 million people, you have an opportunity because you're looking at infrastructure. And you can avoid the costs or significantly reduce the cost of infrastructure if you start thinking about net zero energy, water, and a closed food and waste cycle. And so that's really where it starts to plug in, is thinking about food and waste in that closed loop and thinking about it in the context of infrastructure costs and planning. And so that's really my role in the firm. We've been a signatory to the AIA 2030 commitment since 2010, moving our entire design portfolio to net zero carbon emissions by 2030. This year we're on track to hit an average 60% reduction from the 2030 baseline across our entire portfolio. And we report about 90 million square feet a year. So this is part of that commitment. We're looking at our portfolio and trying to leave a building stock in place that will hit the emissions and environmental performance targets of our clients and our stakeholders.
Great. Nice to see how you're rebuilding the world. Brian?
Well, good morning, Canada. I've always wanted to say that. Am I in here? My name's Brian Stickle. I was the former corporate chef for Clyde's Restaurant Group, so that's about 13 restaurants in the DC metro area. Some very large restaurants. When I was asked what we did, it took me a second. We actually do a lot of things. Unfortunately, for the restaurant business where margins are very tight, a lot of them are financially driven. So if you can save money or make money, that's always a good thing. We do other things. I was thinking, we put a lot of thought into the purveyors we use. Of course, just using local, we've been doing that since the 80s, is a huge thing. Just gas and, but I could say that the bottom line, a tomato from 20 miles away is going to be way better from 2,000 miles away because it's able to be ripe. So it's things like that. We do an oyster recovery program. We sell more oysters on the East Coast, as a restaurant group than anybody else. So what we started doing was we save all these oyster shells, and they smell after a while, so we have to refrigerate them. There's not a lot of spaces in the restaurant, but we still do it where we can. That's through speaking with our purveyors, a lot of the seafood guys, that their livelihood depends on the Chesapeake Bay, a place that had the richest source of oysters, which filter the water, and that's been depleted over the last 100 years. So by recycling these, they break them up, they crush them, they put spat on them, and they start whole new oyster beds. Whether those are used for things you see in the restaurant or they're just in the bay, it's amazing. They took me out on a boat over an oyster bed, and it was absolutely crystal clear. So things like that, they're very convinced that's what's going to save the bay, is getting the oyster population back. We used a company called Copano Bay Blue Shrimp. Very interesting. It's a company in Texas that built this billion-dollar facility. Right now they're just doing shrimp. They're looking to do sablefish, but they're able to do a closed-loop program. Zero waste. The waste from the shrimp themselves are reused as fertilizer. The food they're fed is microbial, so it actually helps eat up the ammonia in the water. They're able to grow, here I wrote this down, 20,000 pounds of protein in 1 acre in 30% less time. And the quality on them is unbelievable. We've used places such as Bell and Evans that have good practices, Shenandoah Valley Co-op for all our meat. And these were, double the price of what we would use to just use your standard chicken or beef. So it costs a great amount, and especially, I've seen personally the rise in proteins, triple in the last 10 years. So we definitely have to be very creative. Nothing is wasted. Charles asked me, what do we do with the leftover food? Our goal is not to have any leftover food. I mean, I can understand like a bagel shop or a bread store where, freshness is, you can't sell day-old bagels, so yeah, maybe give them away. But we have day-old bread, it's croutons or breadcrumbs or something like that, so we're always trying to use that. And there's also another side, in which I've seen, is just technology. In the last couple of years, I don't know if anyone here has heard of sous vide and cryovacking. If you ever go to Costco, they'll have like pre-made, like a chicken curry or something. The shelf life on these now, which is a fresh product, went from a week to be, there's 0 oxygen in there, to 3 months. Okay, so we can do that. We're not losing things, and we can control the quality. We have combi ovens that instead of having ovens run all day constantly, imagine a huge restaurant that has 600 seats. They constantly run. These shut off. They're smart. They understand. They don't burn food. That's another way to lose food. So I just see technology. There's another company that monitors every single refrigerator or walk-in. So if those go off in the middle of the night, you get a text message on your phone, and you're able to respond at the moment. So I'm seeing a lot of that. We've gone from, everyone hears of bottled water, that's a pain. We started using filtered water with reusable bottles. The waiters hate it, but we went from offering a great product, free for the customer as well, but reduced our waste. So
Brian, that's great. Hey, look, I think you've done the deep dive.
Yeah,
that was my
sorry.
second question. So that's,
I'm not answering any more
I love to
questions
see
later.
such enthusiasm. And Bell and Evans, I recognize that name too
Yeah.
from Whole Foods and stuff. So wow,
Yeah.
that is fantastic. I'm really great. And I'll be curious a little bit more about these margins on how you deal with it, because unfortunately sometimes this food does cost a little bit more, but that's a whole nother topic. Hey,
is.
let's circle back to you, Katrin, and I wanted to ask you, we're going to do a bit more of a deep dive, and thank you for your introductions. Hilton, hey, just last week joined the U.S. Food Loss and Waste 2030 Champions, part of the federal government, so congratulations to you on that. And maybe you can say a
Thank
little
you.
bit about that, as well as some of your projects with the World Wildlife Fund, and I think that relates to your whole hotel kit and that sort of thing. So can you tell us a little more about these programs?
Absolutely. So we've been, unlike Brian, we actually have a lot of food waste in hotels. So we have huge meetings and events. We do weddings. We have breakfast buffets. Buffets are one of the biggest sources of food waste. And so we know the hospitality industry has a huge challenge around food waste. And others have taken notice of that too. So
Hold that thought on buffets, because I want to come back to that.
for sure. So the World Wildlife Fund, about 2 years ago, got funding from the Rockefeller Foundation to work with the American Hotel and Lodging Association to really understand this challenge of food waste in the hospitality industry. And Hilton has a strategic partnership with WWF. We work with them on several different areas, including sustainable seafood, water stewardship, and food waste. So we've been working with WWF and with the HNLA to really understand how we can address this issue in our hotels. So through the hotel kitchen work, WWF put together this amazing resource called Hotel Kitchen. It's a toolkit. It's free and available to all, hotelkitchen.org. And we tested it at many of our properties around the world. So we did around 45 pilots globally to really understand how we could implement this toolkit at our properties. And we have now been rolling it out. So we've started with the Americas, and we have set the goal for, by the end of this year, for every single one of our properties, managed properties in the Americas, to do the hotel kitchen training with their food and beverage staff so that they understand ways to decrease the amount of food waste they're producing in the first place. And every property also needs to set up a donation program where legally permissible. So absolutely every one of our properties in the US and Canada needs to have a donation program because there are laws in place protecting food donors. And then finally, every property is expected to set up a food waste diversion program to keep the food waste out of landfill. And the diversion programs are meant to follow the EPA's food recovery hierarchy, although we do give the properties the leniency to select a diversion method that works best for their individual situation. So as you mentioned, Janine, we also recently joined the joint initiative between the EPA, the FDA, and the USDA, the Food Loss and Waste 2030 Champions. So there's 23 companies that are part of this, and it's a group of companies, American companies, that have committed to cutting our food waste by 50% by 2030. And that goal aligns with EPA's goals. It also aligns with Sustainable Development Goal 12.3. So we joined last week along with MGM and Kroger, and we're excited to be a part of such a great initiative.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's move to you, Alain. Thanks for that video. Now I'm kind of confused. Should I put my food down a garbage disposal so it can go to Chris Piat's advanced treatment plant? Or is your system better where it's not using as much water and a truck comes and picks it up? Or should we just compost it and take it over to the Prince George's County landfill? Help us out.
Well, first you should select our technology.
I'd love to do it, but help sell me on it.
Because what we're doing is really circular economy. So all of the waste are changed into a slurry by the robot and then carried to a tank, and the tank is emptied every 10 days. For every customer that we work with, we do an ROI, return on investment study. And after the implementation is done, then we do the case study and we show the results of the case study. As an average, the payback when the customer installs our system is between 1 month to about 27 months. The systems can be leased or can be rented or can be purchased. The reason why the customers select our solution is because it is totally circular economy. So the slurry can be brought to a composting site. It can be brought to a biogas plant, and we use two kinds of biogas plant, municipal type biogas plant or a farmer's biogas plant. What we like the best is probably the farmer's one for one reason, is they use locally the energy from their biogas plant, and then they use they distill it as a compost for their farm, and therefore they don't buy any fertilizer anymore. We also have a research program with a university whereby they will feed some larvae, insect larvae, and then those larvae will be used to feed chicken and pigs and other livestock. Of course, the university says one day human beings will also use those larvae in other forms, like flour, for example. I'm not an advocate of eating insects yet.
Okay, I gotta digest that one a little bit. Okay, Annika, love your kind of cross-sector approach. And I was at the MedImmune site with Charles about a month ago with the Association of Energy Engineers, and was so impressed with their cafeteria, all the zero waste and the food waste and just everything. And you guys were involved in designing that. So maybe can you just tell us a little bit more about some of your great projects you're working on?
Mention a couple of projects. One that I was actually really excited about because it's kind of, I'll say, a mid-range. It's not a whole city, but it's not an individual building. It was a project in Cartagena, Colombia, mixed-use resort campus, around 375 acres. Some multifamily housing, single-family, a couple of hotels, a 200-key, a 100-key, golf club, marina, public access beach, so not completely private. First resort development on the Caribbean. And they were really impressed by what Costa Rica has done with ecological tourism, and definitely in order to get approval for development, needed to have a very strong sustainability plan. And so we came in there, and there's no power, no sewer, and no water infrastructure on this site at all. But what there are a lot of what we'll call squatters. There's people, many are Europeans or Americans that have occupied the beach. They're people,
Europeans and Americans, squatters?
they're people, tourists, people who have come and built these non-permitted structures. They're backpackers, people who come get cheap dwelling overnight or week-long. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of sex trafficking. And there's a lot of garbage and human waste being thrown into the lagoon and to the site in general that's degrading the ecosystem. And so it's a problem that they need to clean up. And so they've got that issue, people who are actively degrading the ecology of the site. And there's no existing infrastructure. And so we're trying to deal with that. And then you have locals who've been selling food to these people, who've been taking the great local seafood and frying fish and doing things like that. But have also been dumping used cooking oil into the lagoon. And so we're trying to deal with all of those things and maintain jobs for locals and deal with the lack of infrastructure. And they would have had to bring power and water and sewage lines in from over 100 kilometers away, which has an inherent cost to it. Every well that you have to drill for clean drinking water has an inherent cost to it. So we started with this premise of net zero energy, water, waste, and food being a part of that waste cycle. Great agriculture in the area, and said, let's look at everything from this net zero perspective. Can we reduce demand for energy and water to the point that we can produce or regenerate everything we need on site? Can we get food locally and recover everything that goes back into either energy or nutrient value for growing more food? Can we harvest this waste cooking oil and use it for energy and buy it back rather than just say, don't put it in the lagoon, that's terrible, and we're going to fine you if you do it. Say, buy it back and have a revenue stream for some of these local folks, which they absolutely loved. And so things like recyclables we talked about in our first panel, there's no recycling infrastructure in this area. And so to have a recycling program isn't really helpful. And a lot of resort companies I've worked with have had this problem historically. You can't just hire a recycling contractor because the recyclables wash back up on shore 3 months later, the plastic bottles and things like that. It's better to avoid the recyclables altogether. Avoid the plastics. Don't have single-use plastics on site. Go straight to compostables. Have a really robust composting program, particularly in an agriculture-rich community, and generate energy, harvest those nutrients. Michael Pollan's book was great because he said for every food calorie that makes it to your plate, 10 petroleum calories went into planting it and growing it and harvesting it and processing it and cleaning it and transporting it and storing it and cooking it and cleaning it and getting it to your plate. And so if we've invested 10 petroleum calories in all of each food calorie on your plate, not to mention water and nutrient value, it's a moral obligation that we would harvest the energy and water and nutrient investment in that food product and do everything we can with that to create new energy and to create new food. And so that was really, it was about jobs, it was about keeping money in the local economy, it was about protecting the local ecology because you have no tourism without a robust and healthy ecology. And we did the same with energy and water, harvesting condensate from mechanical systems, rainwater, everything we could do, and saved the money from the infrastructure of bringing in power lines from 100 plus kilometers away, sewer lines from 100 plus kilometers away.
And how did you do that? Microgrids or something like that? Or?
We reduced the power demand by designing efficient buildings, primarily solar. Cartagena's equatorial, so you have pretty consistent solar access year-round. What we couldn't get at night, we were making up with biogas fuel cells.
Biogas?
Biogas.
Wow.
Using agricultural and organic material.
Ellen, are you happy about that?
Happy about that.
Okay, good. We got to get you down to Cartagena.
Yeah, Cartagena. It's Peninsula Baru, which is near the walled city of Cartagena, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Nice.
Looking at those types of things, and then water using condensate, which is humidity. You're essentially harvesting from the air.
So is this built already?
It's in progress. So it's going to take time. 375 acres of construction takes a little bit of time.
When's it going to be done?
That I cannot commit to. It's in progress.
And who's paying for it?
It's a developer. It's a family-owned developer, but behind that, it's a half family-owned investment company and half Colombian government.
Very, very fascinating. Thank you. Hey, Brian, I wanted to just ask you, in terms of that triangle that I was talking about, reducing food at the source and more efficient use on restaurants. I know you and I were talking in our conference call about walk-in inventory in terms of trying to reduce inventory. Is that something you could talk about a little bit?
Yeah, so you can see through our restaurants, the ones that were built in the 80s, especially outside of the city, the walk-ins are huge. That's not good. I mean, just you obviously as a restaurateur want more seats than kitchen space and walk-in space. And just by that, you know, like if you're familiar with the Hamilton, if you walked in there and saw how big that restaurant is.
Is Elvin here? I know you love the Hamilton.
Yeah, how big that place is and how small the walk-ins are. You'd be amazed. And that was kind of, you know, I, as the chef, kind of got tired of badgering people because over-ordering is a problem. People get nervous and stuff like that. So just by simply reducing the size of the walk-ins, they can only order for that day, maybe for the next day. So food.
How do people get
in.
nervous about over-ordering? Help me out there.
What's that?
How do people get nervous about over-ordering?
Well, you don't want to run out.
Okay,
of food.
okay. So, like an event like here, you'd rather have more than
people
less.
get angry.
Okay, gotcha. No, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, being able to do that, and also using technology where you're able to see the last 5 years on that Friday of that part of the month, what you sold, and break it down. And
You go back that far?
yeah, we have records for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Data analytics.
You'd be amazed. So, yeah, it's a lot of that. But I definitely think just by design, you can cut down on food waste.
Very, very good. Well, thanks. Hey, Alain, just real quick, I want to circle back to you. And then, how much time do we have left? How much?
5 minutes.
5? What?
I'll take them.
Wait, just because the first panel took so much time. Okay. Well, Alain, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the SoluCycle projects, is it restaurants? Is it multifamily complexes? Can you just tell us a little bit about your clientele?
It has been designed for what we call ICI, which is industry, commerce, and institution. So our installations today have been done in grocery stores, shopping malls, congress centers, hotel, restaurants, hospitals, for example. We've done some pilot projects for residential, but we are not currently pursuing those opportunities for now. And just coming back to one of the question earlier, all of our systems are connected to a big data application. So we provide the chain owners all of the information about the water that was used, which is very little because organics have their own water. There is nothing that is rejected to the sewage system. We know when to collect the tank. We know the volume that was collected. We do business with the local hauler, and we do business with a local partner to do maintenance and service contracts. So it's really a partnership with the region where we do business.
Very good. Thank you so much. Hey, the first panel talked about, what was it? Did Adam talk about sort of micro decisions that when you multiply it by millions of people, what an impact it makes? So, I think a question came up on human behavior and conscious consumption and thinking. Katrin, can you tell us a little bit? I was intrigued in terms of what the Hilton is doing with your Meat with Purpose initiative to reduce food waste. You know, buffets, there's so much pressure to have all this food out, and, you know, how do you keep it fresh, and what do you do when people don't eat it all? So, yeah, if you can tell us a bit about that, I think that would be really quite an issue that you guys would be facing.
Absolutely. So one of the big challenges that we found is that, you know, because buffets are designed to look full all the time and look really bountiful, we end up putting out a lot of food that then we usually can't donate because most food rescue organizations will not take food that has already been put out on a buffet line. So we've been looking closely at how we can just reduce the amount of plate waste coming out of buffets as well as just general waste that we're seeing in our buffets. So we've been testing smaller chafing dishes that still look very full, but there's just less food on them. We've had great results with those. Maybe
people lose weight.
Exactly. There's so many
thought?
benefits. We've also been using smaller serving utensils and smaller plates. So it's along the same lines. Guests are taking smaller portions. It still feels like they have a very full plate of food, but they are theoretically not wasting as much, and they can always come back and get more.
Could this solve the obesity epidemic?
I think it could help, but we probably want to get rid of buffets to really solve that. But another thing that we are making sure to test alongside with those, smaller dishes and smaller serving utensils is conscious consumption cues for our guests. So we try to make sure to tell the story of, food waste and why we're really invested in this and the importance of reducing waste. And we use some language that explains, please take what you'll eat and come back for more instead of overloading your plate, and we tie it back to all of our initiatives around the environment. So the aim is not to come across as being too preachy or, just cost cutting, but the goal is really to bring the guest along this journey with us and help them understand how important this issue is.
I love it. Isn't it great? Fantastic. And another thing you're doing, tell us about that lower carbon burger business where you're working
Sure.
with that Better Buying Lab. And Brian, you might be interested in this too. I'll be curious. But go ahead, Katrin, just tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So I know we only have 2 minutes, but Hilton is a founding member of the Better Buying Lab, which is a joint initiative with the World Resources Institute. And the Better Buying Lab is looking at how we can move customers and guests in the direction of eating more sustainably, so more plant-based diets. And one of my favorite examples of how we're doing this is it's called the Blended Burger. It's a burger that is part meat and then part mushroom. And we have a few different recipes, but we also leave it up to our chefs to test the recipe of the type of mushrooms and the exact ratios that they think is the most delicious. And it's had really amazing feedback. In my opinion, it actually tastes even better than a regular burger. The mushrooms really soak up the meat juices. It's super flavorful. So we've been testing these burgers across our managed portfolio in the US, and guests really love them. And it's a kind of fun way to move towards a lower carbon diet and a more plant-based diet.
Can we get that now? I mean,
a lot of our hotels do have it. So the Washington Hilton should have the blended burger. They all have the recipes, and they're kind of bringing them on and off the menus and seeing what the guest uptake of them is.
Great. Hey, I know we're going to wrap up and have questions here, but Annika, real quick, I just want to ask you about ecological certifications, and can you hit on TRUE a little bit? I know some other people have mentioned that, and as well as the USGBC, some announcements coming out in November in terms of reducing food waste and carbon and such, and getting credit, I guess, part of the LEED program, something like that?
Sure, and since we were talking about portion sizes, the Well Building certification also includes in their nourishment category things like mindful eating and reduced portion sizes. So even though it's targeted primarily at the built environment, it has some things that address, reducing our food intake and hopefully helping us become healthier and addressing obesity, and that also will address reducing food waste. So I think there's this great coincidence of green building and healthy eating. LEED, which has new building certification and existing building certification, has been building on this ARC platform that you can log ongoing building operations, things like energy and water use and waste. And so in November at Greenbuild, they'll be launching their net zero certifications for net zero energy, net zero water, and then net zero waste. And it's really based on the carbon emissions from your water consumption and carbon emissions from your waste, and your waste being hauled away and taken off, and the embodied carbon of both energy use, water use, and waste. And so that's really exciting. So people who are hopefully already using these platforms and tracking, but even if you're not, you can start doing it. Every year can get a certification in any one of those three or in all three. And so you don't have to just be a new construction or major renovation, and you don't have to, as previously with LEED existing buildings, do the entire package or wait every 3 years to get a certification. You can just do this on an ongoing basis and just see how well you do and can certify. And then TRUE is a certification based specifically on waste. So, and then other certifications, Green Key specifically targeted at hospitality and hotel certifications and operations, not construction. There's also Blue Flag for beaches and marinas that we've used in hospitality specifically for coastal resorts. And that's on operations and on ecology, as well as things like procurement and waste. So there's a lot of stuff out there. It's really what type of organization and facility and campus and operations do you have. There's something for everyone, and that's what's great to have a lot of tools in the toolkit to meet the goals and objectives of the organization and the facility that you're working with.
Ending. Okay. So we would now like to take this opportunity. I see some people look like they might want to ask a question. Please. I see one over there, one over there. Okay, John Gaffigan, or did you want to ask a question this time? Since we didn't get to you last time?
too.
Okay,
I mean,
so you
come
go
on.
first.
I
Okay.
need to see some love. There's a reason is this why, can you guys hear me out there? Yeah. All right, the sound acoustics don't work too well. All right, so first off, and this to Annika, I'm kind of curious to know your comment about the waste vegetable oil, being, thrown in the lagoon. And this is actually to everybody in food service. I'm curious to know, what is the incidence of these activities versus render haulers picking up your waste oil? And what is your confidence that these same render haulers actually dispose of it properly? And then there's a part to this real quick. But I'd just like to get your sense of that.
Well, they don't do it now. That was prior to the resort being developed. That was when they were serving sort of this squatter population. And so we said, not only do you need a policy to ban that kind of activity, because they were inviting those vendors to come back and serve the new resort community, and those were native Colombians, and they wanted to provide jobs, but they said, don't just have a policy and a fine, offer to buy that back from them and use it as a source of energy. Does waste fuel oil or cooking oil get thrown out? I'm sure a fair amount. Often that's not something that, as the designer, we're informed about. We try to help plan for recycling of things like that and building that infrastructure.
And Katrin may have a stance on that,
Yeah, if so when I came to DC 20 years ago, it was pretty much thrown away to, 15 to 10 years ago, it was sold back about 5 cents a pound. Now, in the last 10 years, we sell it back from anywhere from 25 cents to 50 cents a pound. To the point where if this oil's kept outside, we had to start locking it up because people were going around stealing the barrels to sell it back. So here in DC, it's definitely sold. And usually every restaurant's required by law to have a person that picks up the oil. Okay, you're not allowed to operate unless you can show those receipts. And those are the people that they weigh it and credit you back money. So.
And a second comment, this to Annika, I heard you talk about drawing water out of the air. I'm highly intrigued by that. I'll put a shameless plug out for a philanthropic group that I've just started doing some work with. It's called SolarFi. So solar-fi.com. Feel free to talk with me. This is to provide enablement in a Horatio Alger bootstrap manner for sub-Saharan Africa to grow communities literally in the desert and in barren areas. But I'd like to chat with you about some of your water from air, because that's something I want to try to sort out with the broader scope of what they're doing in this Albany company.
Sure, and there's passive solutions. A lot of people have these like fog nets that harvest from the sort of diurnal dew cycle, or harvesting moisture from air. But through mechanical systems, we have condensate, which is essentially just taking condensation from humid climates, and we have it in DC. I have 3 buildings over at the Noma Metro Station, where we have thousands of gallons of condensate a day from the mechanical system that otherwise would go in the storm drain, and we use it to flush toilets. It's clean water. It hasn't passed over any surface, like a roof, like rainwater has. So it's pretty easy to use to just flush toilets.
Yeah, that's a great use of gray water type application, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very good. Thanks, John. Yes.
Hi, I'm Manahil. I'm a sustainability management student at American University. This is more of a general question for Brian. Can you please touch on the portion sizes in the restaurant industry, and do you see them decreasing in the future? Just something along those.
Absolutely. Especially for us, I think we were known for giving really big portions back in the day, and that's just not the case anymore. with going with like Shenandoah Co-op for beef and stuff, and Bell and Evans, these things are a lot more money because they do things the right way, and you see that, and we want to support that. But so think of we used to do like a 12-ounce sirloin. That's kind of like an inch thick. Now, if you wanted to do a 6 or 8 ounce, it would look horrible. Okay, so what we do, we started getting creative. When you get the whole sirloin, you just cut it down the middle, and then you can do what I think I invented this, like a block cut. So you can do an 8-ounce portion, which most filet mignons are an 8-ounce portion. So, and I think that's plenty of meat for most people. But you can give a nice thick cut. You can still cook it to a temperature. Whereas if it's this thick, like you think of like a diner or something, you can't do a temperature. So definitely portion sizes have gone way down. And I don't think in a bad way. Fish tends to be like 6 ounces for a portion. So, yeah, if that answers your question. And you use, I definitely see a lot more vegetables, a lot more grains and stuff like that. So you still get a great plate.
Yeah, and with that kind of focusing like on the first panel, just the circular economy. A lot of people take leftovers. If you look at restaurants like the Cheesecake Factory, not dissing them or anything, but it's just it's just like you see so many people just taking things home and then they may or may not even eat it. So
Right.
yeah, that's
and it's hard for, like when we switched to Bell and Evans wings, these are all natural. And our wings had gotten out of control. They were like this big, it looked like it came from a turkey, and chickens don't grow that big without, steroids and stuff like that. And that was hard to explain to people, because we didn't do it by weight. It was 12 wings, and they were a lot smaller. Now, if you did a taste test side by side, they're delicious. They're way better. They're healthier. So, yeah, there was definitely some backlash from customers at first, but it depended a lot on the wait staff to explain this is a much higher quality food, and you should feel good about it. And it's from companies that have great practices and treat their animals humanely. And
Amen.
yeah.
I love it. Hey, I just had an issue in my house where I looked on the internet in terms of how many ounces of fish to buy, and I saw 8 ounces, which was really more than my husband and I needed. So we had all this leftover cod. So then we ended up making a soup out of it. Do you guys do anything like that? If you do have, you've overpurchased or anything, any creative ways to kind
With
of
fish?
have some recipes?
Oh, yeah. yeah. Tons
Like
of stuff.
like what?
Well, yeah, bouillabaisse, soups, salmon burger was like a great a thing where we take, when you get whole salmon, the belly, which is what a lot of people use for sushi and stuff. It's the fattiest part. You take all that, you dice it up and make salmon burgers, stuff like that. So
Well, that sounds pretty good.
you can do, at the Hamilton Sushi, they take whole tuna fish frames and they take spoons and scrape, and that's kind of like your tuna tartare or your spicy tuna and stuff like that. So like, it's amazing watching all these guys early in the morning just scraping fish bones to get every ounce of meat, and then all the bones are used for stock. Like nothing goes to waste. Where that goes after that, after we've cooked the bones down. That, I think, is a big...
Sorry cycle.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Talk about the circular economy. That's a perfect way to end. Do you think, Charles? Are we
Sorry,
kicked
Charles.
off? Kicked out of here? Thank you
This is
so
a great
much.
conversation,
Didn't they do
and
a
thank you
great
for the
job? Thank you so much, Charles.
Yeah,
Thank you to our audience.
I speak for everyone, and I think this was very inspiring to get some specialists and to really go deep and to have the full cycle. We've got the manager, we've got the builder, and we've got the chef who controls his kitchen. And talking about inspiring, I just wanted to share with you how this happened, how we decided to put this panel. And I don't know if David is still here from Interchem, but we were going down on the bridge of DC, and he showed me this train, and I said, oh, what's in this train? And David said, oh, it's trash. And I said, where's it from? He's like, from New York. And I said, are we really hoarding trash from New York all the way to Virginia?
It's a resource.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, you gave it away. But yeah, so then I discovered that, man, this is not the circular economy for bringing trash all the way from New York. And that's one of the reasons. The other reason lately I was with Georgetown and American University, and we were discussing, I was sharing what Quebec was doing and what universities here in DC were doing. And then I said, we're putting heat pumps. And then I think it's Georgetown who said, our energy is not as clean. In Quebec, we've got 99.9% renewable electricity. And so that's why we're electrifying all of our schools. But here in the region, we still have coal, we still have these others. And so that was a challenge. We also have, in our differences that we were talking about renewable natural gas. And like Alain was saying earlier, one of our universities is 1/8 of their natural gas will come from renewable natural gas. That's the Saint-Hyacinthe facility. I don't know if you mentioned that. And they do 140,000 tons a year. And they haul trash, their facility, and they do renewable natural gas. And they also power their whole facility, and they save 500,000 a year. And so when we talk about these panels, and one thing that I would take away is always the bottom line. And it got me thinking maybe we should have had an accountant on this panel to really fill it up, to get the full perspective. But those two companies, when I talk about Intercam, and here we see the waste diversion is 90%. So they're still doing composting, but they're taking that extra 30% and making money with it. And when we talk about SoluCycle, they're doing it at IKEA, at Marriott, at Hilton's, already at those restaurants. And they're not just doing it for green, they're doing it for the business case. And it's hard, a lot of companies are not there yet, and we're very glad as the Quebec government to have brought you today two solutions that are not only green, but that also the bottom line works out. So thank you very much for coming. Don't forget, if someone wants last minute to put their card, I'm gonna ask Paul to come up and come and get a card. Does someone want to still put their card in? Yeah, I've got someone. And while we're waiting, I just wanted to thank our partners, Janine, Genevieve, and Dina for their work.